So the Conservative Political Action Conference is in DC. I was actually invited to like a party yesterday at tomorrow at CPAC. I don't think I'm gonna go. I have prior obligations. But the CPAC Political Action Conference is back in DC, and well, it's back up to its old tricks. You don't need woke streaming service anymore. Where globalism goes to die. That seems to be the swing this conference. Anyway, we're just gonna go through some highlights. I'm not gonna watch the whole thing, and I'm not gonna watch the whole thing for a few reasons. But number one, I don't have the time. You can't get the effort out of me if you wanted to get the effort out of me. And so we're just gonna go through some highlights that have been put all together by Aaron Rupar. Let's watch. Let's start with this one. Oh, that's Matt Schlapp. He's the American Conservative Union Chair. I think we actually had another clip of Matt Schlapp somewhere. Yes. Watch.
If you call yourself a journalist, but you spend all your time trying to destroy America and trying to destroy Americans who love America and trying to destroy conservatives and patriots and people from MAGA, and yes, J6. If that's what you do, we don't want you here. You can buy a ticket and just act like any other normal citizen. And if you call yourself...
Okay then. Well, then I guess Aaron's definitely not welcome, and I don't think I'm welcome either. Let's keep going. Oh, here's another thing he said that I thought was interesting. He didn't include it in the list, so I wanted to include it independently. Look at this.
Because there's an important thing going on in our country in which the whole world is watching. And that is, there is a unique American who is being persecuted. Who is being tortured. Who is the victim of the democratic policies based on the world's worst dictators, whether it be Putin or whether it be Xi, the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, doing everything they can to collude, to use the deep state, to use lawfare, to put Donald Trump in prison.
Torture? Where's the torture? What is the torture? Where did the torture come from? What is torture? What is the standard of torture? Is it psychological? Because there's no physical torture. There wasn't assault or anything like that. What torture could he be referring to? Psychological? Were we too mean to him? Torture. My goodness. What a bitch.
Can we send a loud CPAC message to President Donald J. Trump and his family that we stand foursquare with him?
Get all the hairs out of your teeth when you're done slobbing on that knob. Anyway, back to this. I just want our military to be G.I. Joe again. This is from Brian Donalds. Brian Donalds is a new Republican congressman in the House. He was actually one of the few that was throwing his hat in the ring during the speakership race. Now, we burnt through a lot of people during that speakership race very quickly. Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, Tom Emmer, Steve Scalise, before he eventually got with the guy we have now, Moscow's favorite, Mike Johnson. But Brian Daniels did throw his hat in the ring, and he was making a go of it, and he did get support from at least a couple dozen Republican congressmen. He's seen as an up-and-coming Republican, the future of the party, you might say. Let's see what he has to say.
My position is very, very simple.
Oh, one second. Let's turn that up.
My position is very, very simple. Go, kill the enemy, and come home. I'm a kid of the 80s, so I like G.I. Joe. Like, I just want our military to be G.I. Joe again. I think that's what most people want. That's what I want.
So Brian Daniels here is referring to that old idea that the military is becoming too woke, is becoming too gay, it's becoming too libtardy, something along that lines. But generally the idea it's becoming too woke, and the amount of wokeness that the military is concentrating on, it's undermining its military performance. And there's only one problem with that, though. That has not been shown in any capacity when it comes to a military operation. The reason I mean, like, when you think about all the challenges our military faces, right? I would think about, how did we fail in Afghanistan? How did the nation building effort go so wrongly? How did we waste so much money, billions and billions and billions of dollars down the drain in nation building efforts and trying to build infrastructure and trying to work with NGOs and trying to engage in education programs? We educated some people. There are people in Afghanistan today that have education at the auspices of American investment, but the nation we tried to build is gone. Why did we fail? I would think about, hey, we had those 3 American soldiers that died in Jordan. How did the Iranian militias get a drone in to kill them? Oh, they followed the drone. How do we deal with that problem? How do we stop something like a weakness in our defenses from that from happening again? We've got all these actual problems, and we're focused on this. I mean, let me ask you a question. How often, when you hear about our nation's armed forces and Republican commentary on the big screen and talking with the public about the things we need to do to improve it, to make it more cost effective, an audit of the Pentagon, whatever it might be, how much of it is spent just talking about this shit? The whole point of the critique about the wokeness, if it had any water to begin with, which I don't think it really does, but if it did, the whole critique is, they spend too much time focusing on this when we should be focusing on other things. But the time they would focus on it still is a tremendously small amount of time, even if you gathered collectively all of the possibly considered woke material and gather it all together. The average soldier spends much more time working on the other stuff than any of this woke stuff, whatever you would call woke. So of all the problems that soldiers are facing, are the soldiers talking about, increases in pay? Are the soldiers talking about different health problems when it comes to the burn pits, for example? That was a huge scandal on the Hill. That was a huge issue on the Hill. Or are they legitimately coming to these guys? Are soldiers, defense experts, think tank heads coming to these guys and saying, the reason why we're unprepared to defend Taiwan is because the Chinese think we're gay? Is that what they're saying? Are they coming out saying, hey, our soldiers used to be able to shoot straight, now they're not able to shoot to the same quality, and it's because they're just so gay? A lot of the problems that I would hear from military experts is recruitment data. Like, our recruitment numbers are down. Young people, only 7% of American young people have any interest or would consider joining the armed forces. That's a tremendously small amount of people of that subsection. Also, we have young people that are generally more obese than in a lot of other of our countries that are trying to do recruitment as well. So that's a problem we run into. That's why they have talking about lowering the standards all the time, is because we aren't hitting these recruitment data numbers. We aren't hitting these recruitment numbers. But these issues, I never hear. I never hear any of these issues. It's always this. The issue being, oh, we concentrate too much on the woke stuff. The only people I see really concentrating that much on the woke stuff when it comes to like military issues is Republicans. The only time I could think about it where it became like a real issue between Republicans and Democrats fighting was over trans people serving in the military, which no military expert, at least one that was respected, said that that was a real national security concern that had to be addressed. So we were fixing a problem that didn't exist under the Trump administration. And I think when Tommy Tuberville's fight against the government providing transportation costs, covering transportation costs for people trying to get abortion services while in the armed forces because they're trying to cover reproductive health care costs for people in states that are stationed in states that don't have those health care services. But that's a legislative fight. You can go fight that out in the legislature. But again, I feel like, honestly, the wokeness has been built up into a big national security boogeyman. But when you talk to anybody who seriously is concerned about American national security issues, I hear concerns about recruitment. I hear concerns about national health. I hear concerns about, a whole bunch of things. I don't hear concerns about gay soldiers. Here we go.
These wind turbines, there have been more men and women who have died from wind turbines than nuclear power. That is a fact. More people have died from maintaining wind turbines than they've died from nuclear power plants. But you gotta, these wind.
Oof. Well, what's interesting about this statement, what's interesting about this is it's technically true that wind turbines have killed more people than nuclear power. But we're talking about such minuscule numbers that it's like 7 people died to 5. It's like 7 to 5. Why even bring up this data? This is the strange thing about wind turbines, is it feels like Trump picked a fight with wind turbines. He picked a fight with them, said that they're killing the birds, said that they're hurting the environment. And it feels like all the rest of the Republicans just kind of fell in line. Not because it's a particularly important issue for Republican voters, or that it's like wind turbines are actually like an environmental issue. It just feels like a diversion, a way of kind of saying, ha ha, hypocritical to the people who are trying to deal with like global warming. Like, oh, you care about global warming, but you want the big wind turbines that kill birds. It's like when you hear all the time, oh, you care about global warming, but you fly on this plane to the world leaders that want to invest in green energy. I mean, an argument from hypocrisy is already one of the weakest arguments. Not saying that somebody can't be hypocritical. It's just somebody can be hypocritical and right. If somebody was like, murder's bad, but they've engaged in murder, they'd be hypocritical. They wouldn't be wrong about murder being bad. But aside from it being one of the weakest arguments, it also just, I feel like it's just a diversion. It's a diversion from the topic. It's a way to divert from the issue of investing in green energy and investing in trying to have more renewable energy sources, and just saying, well, it's all pointless effort anyway, because all the energy sources are kind of dirty. That's what it feels like to me, at least. Then Donald called for Joe Biden to be prosecuted.
Joe Biden has violated the Espionage Act. He violated it as a United States Senator. He violated it as a Vice President of the United States. And he should be prosecuted for violating the Espionage Act.
To be clear, they had like a 340-page report on Biden and his handling of the classified documents, led by a Republican chair, and they could get nothing on him to show that he committed a crime. Definitely anything that, like Brian Daniels is saying, that they'd have a high enough standard of evidence to prosecute, to the point where it just became a big political sticking point to just go after his age, something unrelated to the topic at hand. So it's hard for me to believe you're going to be able to get anything that could get him prosecuted if even your own Republican investigations are not turning up shit. What's next? Let's go. Let's get past Brian. I'm bored of him already. Oh boy, we got Tommy Tuberville. Senator Tommy Tuberville. This is the guy who was saying recently that it was, the West's fault that Russia invaded Ukraine. He was also the person that held up multiple military officials being promoted into positions like in the officer corps, which, the military is already dealing with a manpower problem, a recruitment problem, and people are trying to, retire, but they can't retire until somebody takes their place. And we were having a lot of positions unfilled, and Tommy Tuberville kept blocking it because the Biden administration had a policy, and we just talked about this earlier, of covering the transportation costs of people in states where abortion is now banned because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade to states where it isn't. Because the government wants to have a generalized standard for reproductive health care coverage for everybody in the armed forces. It wouldn't make sense from the government's perspective to have somebody from California go to somewhere like Alabama, and they would have been able to have the healthcare costs cover their, reproductive health care. But now that they're in Alabama, all of a sudden they can't get that type of healthcare service anymore. And so the government said, and in the face of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and since what used to be a constitutionally protected right of you having this type of bodily autonomy is now gone, we will cover your healthcare costs to transport yourself to another state if that happens. Now, instead of introducing legislation to restrict that, which Tommy Tuberville knew would have failed because the Senate is controlled by Democrats and Biden reserves veto power, Tommy Tuberville instead just blocked military promotions until Biden relented. Biden then refused to relent, and then it became a huge sticking point for the Republican Party, because then military officials were starting to complain that it was having a genuine effect on military readiness. This then led to different national security concerned Democrats, independents, and Republicans to look towards Tommy Tuberville and say, what the fuck are you doing? Stop. Eventually, after like 100-something days, he stopped blocks on the majority of the promotions. I think a few of them he's still holding up, but he might have stopped. I've stopped paying attention. But that's what I know Tommy Tuberville was. That's how I know Tommy Tuberville. Oh, Tommy Tuberville also used to be a football coach. That's how he was famous before he was in the Senate. That's the experience he had before he was elected.
That the boxing committee decided this year that men can box against women in the Olympics.
Oh,
yes.
I don't believe that. Is that real? Olympic Boxing Commission, men can box women. The national governing body for the amateur Olympic style boxing recently codified a rule permitting male participation in women's division in 2024 rule book. This is National Review. Here we go. The Economic Times. To compete female boxers under conditions. USA has implemented a transgender policy enabling male boxers who undergo transition to participate in the female category starting in 2024. The governing body responsible for overseeing the amateur and Olympic style boxing in the United States established specific conditions for transgender athletes to compete. Although boxers under 18 must continue competing based on their birth gender, transgender fighters are allowed to select their preferred category. To qualify, they must meet specific criteria, such as declaring their new gender identity, undergoing gender reassignment surgery. Also, you have to go through surgery, okay, and undergoing regular hormone testing. Transgender athletes, regardless of gender identity, are required to undergo quarterly hormone testing and submit documentation of their hormone levels to U.S. boxing for a minimum of 4 years post-surgery. For those transitioning from male to female, a testosterone level below 5 for 48 months before their initial competition and throughout the eligibility period is necessary. Conversely, male boxers must demonstrate a testosterone level above 10 for 48 months. Huh. So they have actually put forward a path for them then. It isn't just, he said men, so what made me believe is just it was a man can declare I am woman and then they can fight. But it seems like there is some rigorous testing for this. I don't know how many people are going to take advantage of this. I don't know about the testosterone testing as a model to gauge whether or not somebody is like lowered their physicality enough. And I hate to put it that way, but that's the only way I can. Lowered their like strength and power from a man to like a woman by just having lower levels of testosterone. Because I mean, I've seen like women, extremely like athletic women with very high testosterone levels, to the point that it actually became a problem for them because of restrictions that were implemented due to this specific issue. Anyway, interesting, but he didn't present it completely accurately, but that is an interesting Olympic update. I'm of the opinion that boxing is a combat sport. As long as somebody has an unfair physical advantage, like extreme size and, you know, extreme weight advantage, stuff like that, they should be separated. That's why we have weight classes. That's why we have, you know, a whole weight system. So if we were to implement this, it would have to be through a long, durable process of somebody going through the entirety of the transition process to know that it wouldn't be somebody going in with male testosterone, male bone structure to fight in these battles. But then there's always the case that's made to me in comparison or in reaction to that, a reaction to my concerns about that. Like, what about the women who are extremely strong or extremly powerful? And yeah, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I don't like the idea of, I mean, if you have a 165-pound man and 165-pound woman and they fight, the man's going to win 9 times out of 10 every time. So it's a hard issue. I generally don't know the exact answer to it. But it's still not men. They allow the men to just fight the women. Anyway, next one. Tommy Tuberville on Trump's loss in 2020. They stuffed the ballot box on him 4 years ago.
We have to have a leader of this country. And you know what I'm coming to. We had a leader for 4 years, and they ran him out. They ran him out, and they're trying to keep him getting reelected this time. They stuffed a ballot box on him 4 years ago. We've got to get Donald Trump elected president of the United States. Folks.
So he's just straight up claiming that it was 100% rigged, that the 2020 election was just completely rigged. Again, there's been, like, the Trump campaign brought case after case after case before court after court. They were never able to prove that it was rigged. There's been tons and tons and tons of both professional journalists and civilian journalists that have dug into the issue, and they found diddly squat to find any level of mass fraud that could have overturned the vote or the election. There's been individual instances of fraud of like one person voting 5 times or voting for other people, and those people are caught and they're prosecuted, but nothing that could ever overturn the results of the presidential election. So this is just like a flat out lie, claiming it to please the audience, reinforcing their delusions for his own political gain. They know a lot of these people are going to go to jail when Donald Trump goes elected, and I'm going to be right there to help him.
It'll be a tough time because they can't give up. They know a lot of these people are going to go to jail when Donald Trump gets elected, and I'm going to be right there helping.
I'm going to be glued to the TV when that's happening.
This seems fine. This seems safe. This is quite the topic for a CPAC panel. What's the topic?
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, catfight, Michelle versus Kamala.
That threw me for a loop. Michelle versus Kamala? This is the panel for this? What? Who are these people?
The difference, Monica, is that Richard Nixon had respect for norms. He had respect for the United States of America. These guys don't. Joe Biden doesn't. Joe Biden is the capo of a criminal organization, the Biden family. He doesn't care about the country. Again, like the key pillar to their argument was just found to literally be, I mean, we don't know he's working as a Russian intelligence asset, but having ties to Russian intelligence, and now we know that he was just making shit up. And this is what Jim Jordan and all the people pushing hardest for Joe Biden's prosecution. This was what they called, what Jim Jordan called, the centerpiece to the Biden crime family case. And it was found to be complete bullshit. I'm not saying that it's impossible that any corruption could have occurred. What I am saying is the Republicans have failed on every level to prove it. Family. He doesn't care about the country. All he cares about is himself. I can see him, you know, the day after his next inauguration, or the day before Donald Trump's inauguration, God willing, him pardoning his brother, his son, and himself. So this is utter delusion. You know, I don't think that's going to work because they're never going to jail, and I just don't see him leaving. And remember, the 25th Amendment. At least that's true. They probably are never going to jail. That takes Republican help.
There's an interesting point here that I wanted that Larry brought.
Man, these people are fucking crazy.
Clinton was our first black president. That makes her, technically, she would be our first black woman president, right? Yeah.
I guess so.
Well, and Kamala could be our first black woman president. And Michelle, well.
Look, to be clear, guys, to be clear, I want President.
Okay. He'll send a Hellfire rocket down there. Tom Hogan on Trump bombing Mexico in a second term. Former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the Trump admin. Trump administration official here.
President Trump would declare him a terrorist organization. He would send a Hellfire rocket.
He's talking about the cartels.
Down there. He would take the cartels out because they need to be taken out because they killed over 100,000 Americans. This administration has held Mexico accountable. They haven't held China accountable for creating all the fentanyl they're selling to the.
How did Trump hold Mexico accountable? And how did Trump hold China accountable for the fentanyl? Oh, I can tell you that Biden actually, he's saying he's not holding them accountable for fentanyl. Didn't Biden just come to an agreement with Xi Jinping in, I think it was in San Francisco. They had a meeting over specifically a bunch of issues, but also fentanyl. And they came to an agreement that China would help stem the flow of fentanyl into the United States. I mean, did it go far enough? Probably not as much as we wanted, but it's the first time they've been able to get an agreement like that and a commitment like that. Now there's the question of whether they're going to follow up enforcing on the ground. There's been a few places already raided. Hopefully they continue to raid these places, but we'll have to wait and see.
The criminal cartels, this administration sitting back and watch this country get destroyed. We need President Trump back to save this great nation. He's a guy, and we need him back.
And so, Sarah.
Okay, let me just throw out there. How do you just bomb the cartels and it makes them go away? That's the solution to crime. So we go into Chicago, we find the gangs, we just like Hellfire missile them. just drone strike them, and then they just go away. I mean, remember when we just bombed Vietnam and then we won that war? And we took over and the Vietnam's like a prosperous liberal democracy now? Because we just endlessly bombed it? Or Afghanistan is another great example. The other one, we bombed the freedom into them. How does this work? You would need American troops on the ground in Mexico to enforce said regimen. You would have to have troops on the ground in these communities where the cartel were to flush them out, kill, capture their fighters, dismantle their armed forces, destroy their heavy equipment, because they do have armored vehicles. They do have heavy equipment. They can fight they can fight a war. And then you, after crushing them, you have to enforce the law for years, helping it to stabilize the country with the Mexican authorities, who are going to be essential for any effort to stabilize control in these areas. Because we are not going to have, I don't think the American public would support it, a forever war in Mexico against the cartels. I don't want to call it a forever war, but I mean, if you just are doing bombing raids, that's what it will be, because you won't get anything out of it. So my problem with a lot of these Republican plans is most of these plans that I see about how to fight the cartels in Mexico completely box out the Mexican government. As in, they kind of, either they take their support as a given, which it should not be a given because the Mexican authorities don't want American troops invading Mexico to fight the cartels. But not only is it a given in some of them, but some of them go even further and they say, no, it's not a given, but we don't care. We can do it without them. We can fight the cartels without the Mexican government, which is the most delusional bullshit I've ever heard in my life. You can't just bomb them out of existence. Other gangs will take their place. Dropping bombs doesn't create conditions where gangs don't exist. In fact, creating poverty and destruction and bombing things, I mean, it's not like, like, look at Haiti. You destroy the country, you destroy tons of infrastructure, destroy the economy. I don't know how dropping bombs in and of itself is a solution to any Mexico's problems. And saying Hellfire missile them is the equivalent of just saying, hit them hard. That's the equivalent of what he just did on that stage. It's simple, dumb, and tailor-made for that audience. Laura Trump says her kids say the Pledge of Allegiance before they go to sleep. I'm sorry. What a ridiculous claim.
Every night, Eric and I have a tradition. We stop whatever we have going on, and we go do bedtime with the kids. And while they say their prayers and the Pledge of Allegiance, of course, I often think to myself...
they didn't even clap. Even they think that's weird as fuck. Even they're like, what? What do you mean? Because I grew up, you pray. You pray, and then you go to sleep. That's how I was reading about my grandparents. You pray for the safety of your loved ones, you pray for the blessing of God, then you go to sleep. You might get if you see a bug, hit him with a shoe and remember, I love you. There might be like little traditions like that. But the Pledge of Allegiance, you get like out the flag, play the national anthem. Oh, that's a grand old flag. No, like, come on, get out of here. Not even that crowd loves that shit. They're fucking just weirded out, just like I am.
And the Pledge of Allegiance, of course.
One clap.
I often think to myself,
a single clap.
What kind of country will they live in 10, 20, or 30 years? Will
their children say the pledge before sleep? Oh my God, is this really the crowd at CPAC? Oof. My God. Our canvassing event in Ohio did way better numbers than this. I'm sure this is just a bad clip. At least for their sake. Anyway, that's enough of the CPAC.